Hello health champions, today we're going to talk about the top 10 secrets to never get sick again. Coming right up. Hey, I'm Dr. Ekberg. I'm a holistic doctor and a former Olympic decathlete. And if you want to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything. Every time that flu season comes around or there's an epidemic of some sort, then there is a lot of talk about how to prevent the spread and how to contain it and washing hands and so forth. And that's all good, but no one ever talks about what makes the difference in how capable the body is at resisting the infection and coping with the infection. What makes the difference between being exposed and staying healthy or being exposed and getting sick or even worse, dying? So today we're going to go over all those things that they don't usually talk about. How do we boost the body's immunity? How do we upregulate our immune system? And most importantly, how do we understand the most basic mechanisms in your body, in your nervous system, that decide, based on circumstances, whether to upregulate or downregulate your immune function? So the first two things you want to do is under avoiding exposure. So these have to do with hygiene and sanitation. And when it comes to public health, this is what public health has been responsible for. And they have done a tremendous job. That is the number one factor that has increased life expectancy, that has increased the average lifespan of humans, is because we don't die from infections anymore. And the number one reason that we have raised the life expectancy as much as we have is because of public health, of hygiene and sanitation. So those things are important, but everyone else already talks about those. So we know you want to wash your hands, you want to wipe off surfaces, you want to use some common sense, all right? So we'll leave it at that. And then we're going to spend the rest of the time on the things that other people don't talk about. How do you make your body work better so that you don't catch the stuff that comes around? So next you want to pay attention to nutrition. And under nutrition, there's a couple of things. First, you stop putting bad stuff in, and then you start putting good stuff in. So avoiding the bad, the number one thing you want to avoid is sugar, right? You want to avoid putting things in that destroy or interfere or downregulate your immunity. And sugar does that, but more than that, sugar it selectively feeds the pathogenic bacteria in your body. So everything you don't want in your body, the virus, the bacteria, the yeast, fungus, parasites, and even cancer, they love sugar. So if you stop putting sugar in, you've already made a tremendous difference in your immunity. Next, you want to stop putting toxins in. Anything that's foreign, we're talking environmental pollutants and pesticides, but also all the stuff they put in food, right? If you don't know what it is on the list of ingredients, don't buy it. Whole food doesn't need a long list of ingredients, and anything toxic like a preservative or an artificial color or artificial flavor or artificial anything, it's foreign to your body. Your liver is going to have to neutralize and detox it, and it's going to have to spend resources. It's going to have to expend resources that it could be using for other things like immune function, right? So stop putting bad stuff in. Next, you want to put some good things in your body. And now we're talking fresh whole foods primarily. Every cell in your body, whether it's a tissue cell or a brain cell or a liver cell or an immune cell, they have requirements. They need certain things. They need vitamins, they need minerals, they need essential amino acids and essential fatty acids. And if your body has plenty of those, there's a greater probability that your body has what it needs to make the necessary immune cells. Whereas if you eat all processed foods and you don't have any of those nutrients, then your body is going to fall short in terms of manufacturing those immune cells. Next, you want to also think about your intestinal flora, the bacterial flora. And you have about 40 trillion cells, give or take, in your gut. And normally there's a balance. If you're healthy, there's a balance between the so-called beneficial and the pathogenic. And the pathogenic aren't really bad unless there's an imbalance. If they're kept in check, then they actually serve a purpose. But if we get things out of balance by feeding them sugar, now the pathogenic ones take over and we start dysregulating our entire immune system. And most of your immune system is in the gut, so it makes good sense to try to take care of it. So first thing is to cut out the sugar, then you eat whole fresh food, but then you can also add on some fermented foods and maybe even some probiotics. Don't think of them as a cure-all though, all right? They can be a good little factor to tip the scale, but they're not going to undo a bunch of other great imbalances. They're not going to undo a lot of other bad habits that you have. Those are the very basics. Now we're getting to the core of the issue. What is it actually that decides when to turn on or off your immune system? What is it in the body that makes the decision to increase or decrease? All right? And the answer is your autonomic nervous system. It's the part of your brain and nervous system that handles everything you don't have to think about. You're focused, you're consciously focused on a lot of things around you, but there's about 1 million times more stuff going on behind the scenes that are managed by your autonomic nervous system. And this autonomic nervous system, the main task that it has is to allocate resources. It's to decide what's the most important thing that we have to do right now. With all this stuff going on, how do we spend the resources to make the best possible result? And stress is the #1 factor that the autonomic nervous system has to deal with. And whenever we have stress, the body creates a response, right? It's not the stress that makes the difference. It's the nervous system's interpretation of a factor that becomes a stress and that you have a stress response to. And whenever you have a response, now the brain changes how it allocates the resources. It makes a different decision based on whatever happened that it interpreted as stress. And the autonomic nervous system has 2 branches. One is called the sympathetic and one is called the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is what people think of as fight-flight, your fight-flight system. And the parasympathetic is your feed-breed. So we're going to simplify this even a little further, and we're going to say that the sympathetic primarily focuses on things outside of you, things that could threaten you from the outside, like enemies or cars or grizzly bears or external dangers, all right? The parasympathetic handles everything inside. It handles your digestion, your immune system, your detoxification, your reproductive function, and your healing, right? So everything inside is parasympathetic, everything outside is sympathetic. That's the simplest way of thinking about this. So the nervous system, based on its interpretation of stress, is going to allocate resources differently. So think of it as a faucet, that there's so much fluid, there's so much resources flowing through the pipeline, and it can go either into the sympathetic or the parasympathetic. And depending on the situation, we're going to get different scenarios. So it's not that one is good and the other is bad, because we need them both, but we need to be able to be flexible and make the most appropriate decision. So this would represent a 50-50 balance. This would represent a sympathetic dominance. This is when we have a lot of stress. So if a grizzly bear is attacking us, then this would be appropriate because it would save our life. If we have an infection or if we're sleeping or meditating, then most of the attention would be on the parasympathetic. There would be very, very little sympathetic activity. There'd be very little attention on the outside. All right? So we need all of these, and we need to be able to be flexible and be able to change appropriately. Here's the problem, that stress activates sympathetic responses. It starts defending us toward things on the outside, whether it's real or imagined. So anything that makes you tense or frustrated or angry or overwhelmed or fearful or anxious or guilty or whatever bad feeling you have is going to trigger a sympathetic response. So this isn't just a grizzly bear, this is a sympathetic dominance that most people have due to emotional stress and overwhelm. And that means that the faucet is pretty much turned entirely off for your immune system. So this is critical to understand, that why do students get colds around exam time? Whenever there's finals or midterms, the frequency, the percentage of students with colds and sniffling and coughing goes up exponentially. It's because they eat junk, they drink coffee, they eat sugar, and they stay up all night, they don't get enough sleep, they have a lot of stress, and their immune system shuts down because you reallocated the resources away from the immune system. And same thing with anybody who gets the cold or flu whenever it comes around, right? It's not, the difference isn't primarily if you get exposed or how much exposure you get. The difference is primarily how much resistance you have. Okay? These are opportunistic pathogens. They take the opportunity of a weak host. If you don't present them the opportunity, they'll bounce off of you and they have no business coming near you. We want to be able to be flexible, and we want to be able to reduce the chronic stress. So let's take a look at, now that we understand what drives stress, what regulates stress and immune responses, let's take a look at some things we can do. The next thing we have to understand about stress, though, is that some stress is beneficial. Some stress is normal and stimulating and healthy, whereas other types of stress can be destructive. And what's the difference? Well, this stress response, this fight-flight response, was developed in a world where we were required to have quick bursts of activity. Okay? If there was a danger, we had to run or fight or climb a tree. We had to generate physical resources, increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, increase muscle tone, make it out of the dangerous situation so we can make it to safety. But those types of stresses were short-lived. They were supposed to last for a few minutes and then they were over. All right? So today, though, these imagined stresses, the emotional stresses, the deadlines and the tension and the overwhelm, they're chronic. They're like a baseline that stays with us day in and day out. So they become destructive, and those we want to decrease, but we can actually increase our health and our immunity by using some of those short-term stresses. So the number one short-term physical stress that is very common, that everyone should do, is called exercise. And the purpose of exercise, there's many benefits. It increases circulation, it changes hormones. But for our purposes, what we're talking about is that when you challenge the body, then it kind of bounces back and becomes better. So if you challenge it by increasing the heart rate like you would in high-intensity interval training, then you challenge it so it has to become better. It upregulates something so it can do it better tomorrow. And they found that these kinds of challenges actually increases your immune system. It upregulates your white blood cell count, but it also even changes your DNA. It activates longevity genes. Your genetic makeup is fine-tuned for the better by performing these. So these stresses, even though we talk about stress as a bad thing, some things short term are actually very, very beneficial. So high intensity interval training would be increasing your heart rate. You can also do it with weightlifting. If you challenge your body with weights, if you lift something real heavy, and it needs to be pretty heavy, so do something that you can load up pretty massive weight and have the potential for failure almost. So it needs to be a significant resistance. Then your body says, hey, this was really heavy, I'd better change something, I'd better adapt so I can cope with this better tomorrow. Another very interesting way is number 6, that you can also create a similar benefit from hot and cold contrast. So in Sweden and Finland, there's a tradition of hot saunas. So you get into a little enclosure that's super hot, you sit in there for 10-15 minutes, and then you run out into the snow or into the cold water. Sometimes they open up a hole in the ice and jump into the water. And of course, you don't do that for any length of time. You get in for a few seconds and you jump out and you go back in the sauna. So you alternate the hot and the cold, and you get some of this physical stress that is beneficial for the body. If you don't have a sauna, you can do the same thing. Simply stand in your nice, comfortable, warm shower, and then you just turn off the hot and you stand there in the cold for 20-30 seconds. I know it's a revolting feeling, revolting idea, but if you get used to the idea and you practice it, it gets easier and easier, and you can get some of these same benefits. So that's the type of natural stress that we're designed for. It's appropriate. If we do it short term, it's actually very, very healthy. The other type of stress is chronic stress. There's nothing good about it because long-term stress we were never designed for. It just wears on us day in and day out. It wears us down. We have no chance to recover from it as long as it goes on. It's unnatural and destructive. So this, we want to do everything we can. We want to learn how to counteract it. So number 7 is to understand that when you feel good, you can't feel bad. All right, that sounds stupid, but if you pay attention to how you feel and you know that you're tense or frustrated or overwhelmed, and you decide, hey, let's change this. I don't like the way I'm feeling. I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to wallow in my misery. I'm going to snap out of it. I'm going to go turn on a funny movie. I'm going to read a good book. I'm going to change the way I feel. Then it sounds too simple, I know, but it works. When you feel good, you can't feel bad. It's really as simple as that. And if we learn to pay attention to how we feel and we create regular habits and we take the time to do this, it doesn't have to be all day long. A few minutes at a time is sufficient to break the pattern. Number 8, we want to make sure we get enough sleep, because chronic sleep deprivation is a tremendous stress. When we have a lot of stress, when we feel stressed and tense and overwhelmed, we need more sleep because the stress is wearing us down. And then those people are often the ones who get less sleep. So that's kind of a vicious cycle there. But it's not like everyone needs 7 or 8 or 9 hours. It depends on the person, and it depends on how well we cope with stress. So don't think that just because someone else sleeps for 9 hours, you have to. But pay attention to how you feel and get the appropriate amount of sleep for you so you're recovered. Number 9. EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, and the Sedona method. These are 2 of my favorites because they are developed methods. Those are techniques that you can learn to create a pattern interrupt. The problem with all these negative emotions is they become habits. Okay, we experience them so much that we get really good at it. It's something that we do. We don't want to think of it as something we do. We think they happen to us, but that's not really true. We learn a certain behavior in response to certain things, and then we get good at it. But if we learn some methods, some techniques to interrupt that pattern and do something different, then we can get the nervous system, we can change the habit and get it onto a different track. So these are methods that you can learn. They are about how to change how you feel in this moment. They can be very, very powerful by learning how to pay attention and to shift it. And number 10 is meditation, breathing exercises, and relaxation training. The relaxation response is the opposite of the stress response. So by learning to relax and not just having a couple of drinks and watching TV, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about changing your mental focus, practicing a different focus so that you learn how to relax. Breathing is a very useful component of that. We've done some other videos. You breathe in for 5 seconds, out for 5 seconds. That's a basic pattern that can serve as a foundation for relaxation training and meditation. But meditation goes a little bit further. Okay? It's about finding a different place inside you. So there's lots of different guided meditations and transcendental meditation, and the more you do it, the better you get. And I think if there's anything that can get you healthy and reduce stress and change your life for the positive, it would be to learn and practice meditation on a regular basis. And then we want to talk about balance a little bit, because everything in the body is about balance. It's balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic. It's a balance between how much we do of these different things. And right from the start here, that public health has been fantastically transformative for longevity and human health. Okay, there's no doubt about it. They have transformed society, but there is a tendency also to take it a little too far. We have germophobia. We spray and we disinfect and we wipe down and we spread chemicals on surfaces and on our hands. And if we completely eliminate our exposure to pathogens, then we also don't give our immune system an opportunity to learn about these pathogens and develop immunity against it. Part of a strong immune system is to have exposure to different pathogens, right? So it's not like we're ever going to get away from it, but we can't take it too far. So that's not to say that you shouldn't follow the guidelines, the public health guidelines, when there's flu season or an epidemic, because their job is to prevent spread, and it's crucial that we follow their guidelines. But we don't want to take it too far, and we want to understand that you do have an immune system, and you don't want to try to completely sterilize your environment in every way, right? There's a balance here. The other balance I wanted to cover real quick was of these challenges of high intensity interval training, about jumping in holes in the ice, in doing workouts. Just because there's some tremendous benefit to this doesn't mean that more is better, all right? So if you can boost your immune system from jumping in the ice for 20 seconds, it doesn't mean 20 minutes is better. Even if you can be macho and survive it, it's not that you're going to get 100 times the benefit. And the same thing with any of these challenges, high intensity interval training. It's not about doing more, it's just about getting the challenge in. Get in, get out, be done with it, all right? High intensity interval training, you just get up to a peak. You do it once or twice, even if it's just for seconds that you stay on that peak. And you don't do it more than a couple of times a week, right? Because more isn't better. So just keep that in mind. So for the bonus, I'm going to share a poll that we did on our channel on ways that people use to boost their immune system. And then I'm going to couple that with an interesting piece of research that I found. So we asked people what they were doing to boost immunity, and we gave them some options. And whole food, there were 17% of people that said they used whole food to boost immunity. 22% said they used low carb living. 4% each said they used breathing or relaxation training. And I was kind of surprised at how low that was, because that's going to be very high on my list. It's not that you want to rank these because you want to do as many of them as possible at the same time. But then when it came to fasting, 53% of the people who took the poll on my channel said that they did regular fasting to improve their immunity. And that, I think, is fantastic. I mean, it kind of shows the type of people who watch this sort of content, but still 53% is pretty impressive. Now, what's so interesting about that was I found a piece of research about some German researchers who had studied fasting and immunity and the effect, the beneficial effects of autophagy on some of these very, very serious viruses, some of these life-threatening viruses. And this research was published in Nature magazine, which is maybe the most prestigious biological publication there is. And they found that autophagy had a significant, very important mechanism, ability to reduce the proliferation of the MERS virus. So MERS was one of the earlier coronaviruses, and they found that autophagy could dramatically reduce the spread and proliferation of that. And they believed that the mechanism involved could also be applicable, that it could also be beneficial for other viruses and other coronaviruses like the SARS and like the new virus of Wuhan, China in 2019. So I think that the people who watch my channel are probably ahead of their times with 53% already protecting themselves, boosting their immunity with fasting. So thumbs up, huge congratulations to all the people who participated and all the people who are so ahead of their time. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you check out that one. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.